Darkness covered Iron Batom Sound as November 15th unfolded, and American sailors prepared nervously for a battle no doctrine predicted ever. The night carried a heavy silence, and distant surf masked the tension gripping every watch officer scanning the black horizon. American destroyers bled smoke earlier, and their damage reminded Washington's crew that Japan dominated previous night engagements with ruthless skill. Admiral Willis Lee studied radar returns carefully, and his calm manner steadied men who trusted him more than moonlit horizons. Washington advanced deliberately through darkness, and her engines beat a steady rhythm felt across steel decks tense with expectation. Tonight, lookouts strained their eyes repeatedly, yet radar operators quietly tracked distant shapes that traditional seamanship would never have detected before. The Japanese approach remained unseen visually, though Washington's instruments revealed movement suggesting a powerful enemy force closing dangerously near swiftly. Every officer understood the stakes clearly, because defeat here would expose remaining transports and jeopardize the entire Guadalcanal campaign below. Metal creaked softly around gun turrets, and crews whispered brief prayers while adjusting sights they trusted more than instinct alone. Washington's 17-inch armor seemed unbreakable, yet sailors remembered earlier losses proving that courage alone could not outrun Japanese firepower forever. The sea rolled calmly beneath Washington, and its deceptive gentleness contrasted sharply with the violence approaching through darkness and uncertainty tonight. Signals. Officers exchanged quiet updates fleetingly, and each message confirmed that Washington's radar picture strengthened their growing tactical confidence significantly now. Far off to port a faint echo flickered, and operators identified it carefully as a large warship maneuvering without visual awareness. Recognized the moment instantly, and he ordered Washington forward, decisively believing radar precision finally offered Americans' dominance within night combat. Gunners steadied themselves grimly, and they remembered training hours that taught patience because rushed decisions often doomed entire naval formations. Before dark silhouettes drifted across memory, and earlier battles reminded veterans how Japanese night tactics inflicted devastating losses previously considered nearly unstoppable. The quiet broadened dramatically around Washington, and anticipation grew heavier as the crew sensed history forming silently just beyond visible range. Every heartbeat felt synchronized with the engines, and sailors waited stoically knowing decisive action might finally reverse months of relentless struggle. On that moonless water Washington moved relentlessly, and her purposeful silence carried the weight of a nation depending on unseen courage. The unseen battle axis tightened gradually, and Lee prepared himself knowing the upcoming seconds would determine control of Iron Batom Sound forever. Moments stretched impossibly long around every station, and the crew braced collectively for contact that would redefine naval warfare forever. Radar confirmed the enemy unmistakably. Washington surged confidently forward, carrying America's determination into a night dominated by electronic vision. Admiral Willis Lee studied every radar return carefully, and his quiet confidence inspired crews who trusted electronic signals more than uncertain moonlit horizons tonight. He understood Japanese night tactics thoroughly, and his analytical mind realized technology offered the only advantage that could reverse brutal Pacific attrition decisively. Lee avoided dramatic speeches intentionally, and his calm presence created discipline across Washington because sailors sensed competence radiating through every measured command. Other commanders preferred traditional optics repeatedly, yet Lee insisted radar held the future since machines never blinked when gunfire erupted suddenly. He spent years mastering fire control calculations diligently, and his mathematical background allowed rapid decisions that overwhelmed opponents. Relying solely on trained instincts, Washington's radar team respected him greatly, because he visited their stations often demonstrating unique knowledge that erased doubts about electronic precision. Lee's experience in gunnery competitions shaped his thinking significantly, and he believed accuracy required cold logic instead of outdated traditions dominating earlier naval tactics. He challenged older officers respectfully, yet he refused to compromise when radar evidence contradicted visual assumptions that once governed fleet doctrine everywhere. Lee read battle reports obsessively, and he calculated probabilities, revealing radar allowed detection before any opposing commander even sensed approaching danger. He carried a quiet determination constantly, and his belief in American engineering helped Washington's crew accept innovation that felt unfamiliar initially. Lee trusted radar so completely because he witnessed tests where electronic pulses pierced darkness flawlessly while human eyesight failed without warning. Many officers described him as reserved. Yet his introspective manner masked a fierce competitive spirit driven by precision and unwavering discipline. He trained younger commanders rigorously, and his insistence on understanding radar wave behavior elevated the entire Pacific Fleet's night fighting capability. Lee's strategic vision felt unconventional then. However, history later proved he understood the transformation occurring within naval warfare more clearly. He preferred studying equipment personally, and he memorized pulse intervals, enabling him to interpret blips faster than operators relying strictly on manuals. Washington responded to his leadership smoothly, because sailors trusted decisions grounded in data derived from invisible beams scanning distant waters quietly. Lee rejected superstition decisively, and he believed darkness favored those who embraced innovation rather than cling desperately to failing pre-war habits. During planning sessions he spoke sparingly, yet every officer understood that his silence reflected calculations refining future battlefield dominance continuously. His faith in radar hardened after repeated demonstrations, and he viewed the technology as an equalizer capable of neutralizing formidable Japanese night experience. Lee carried no illusions about risk, but he recognized that decisive aggression backed by radar could dismantle enemy formations swiftly. He envisioned battleships leading nocturnal engagements confidently, and Washington became the ideal instrument for proving electronic warfare's potential during actual combat conditions. As Iron Bottom Sound approached menacingly that night, Lee trusted radar entirely, knowing its silent truth would guide every historic decision. USS Washington advanced through Iron Bottom Sound carefully, and her massive silhouette disappeared completely into the black Pacific night surrounding every restless sailor. The battleship carried a hardened crew seasoned by Atlantic patrols, and their disciplined professionalism made Washington the most trusted warship entering this dangerous arena. Her 16-inch guns remained silent initially, yet each turret waited like a coiled predator prepared to unleash devastating fire when required. Washington's approach relied entirely on radar guidance tonight, and this unprecedented dependence allowed her to navigate unseen waters with astonishing precision. Crewmen felt the oppressive darkness pressing tightly, but confidence surged quietly because the ship's machinery offered clarity no human eye could provide. Every radar operator monitored the shifting echoes methodically, and they understood this technology granted Washington lethal awareness unmatched by any Japanese vessel nearby. Her machinery vibrated faintly beneath steel decks, and the constant rhythm reminded sailors that Washington embodied American engineering excellence under the harshest battlefield conditions. Officers moved between plotting rooms deliberately, and each updated position reflected data streaming from electronic pulses, detecting distant hostiles with absolute reliability. Washington entered the engagement zone stealthily, and her concealed presence granted Admiral Lee the freedom to act before Japan recognized approaching danger. The battleship's armor promised remarkable survivability in gun duels. Yet her true power tonight came from eyes that penetrated absolute darkness effortlessly. Engineers monitored propulsion systems intensely, ensuring Washington held speed advantages critical for maneuvering around Japanese destroyers patrolling treacherous channels under concealment. Lookouts strained against the night instinctively, although they knew radar would reveal incoming threats long before silhouettes appeared across turbulent water. Gunners at their stations reviewed firing procedures continuously, and every man recognized Washington could deliver devastating accuracy once the order finally arrived. Her combat information center glowed dimly under red lighting, and within this nerve center specialists fused sensor readings into a coherent battlefield picture. Washington felt like a silent fortress drifting across hostile waters, and her restrained power created tension that electrified every experienced sailor aboard. Messages traveled through sound-powered phones efficiently, and communication discipline underscored the crew's understanding that flawless coordination determined survival in nocturnal combat. As other American ships struggled without radar mastery, Washington's calm movement demonstrated how technological advantage could overturn Japanese dominance established earlier in the war. Her advanced fire control systems waited patiently, and crews trusted the mechanical logic that calculated trajectories unaffected by darkness or stress. While distant gunfire echoed faintly through the strait, Washington remained undetected because her electronic shield erased reliance on unreliable moonlit visibility. She advanced toward the coming battle with controlled momentum, and every sailor sensed this night would decide whether technology reshaped modern naval warfare forever. Kirishima moved confidently through the dark strait, and her seasoned crew trusted long years of combat experience earned across the Pacific. This battlecruiser carried scars from earlier campaigns proudly, and each scar reminded sailors that she survived storms, bombardments, and relentless American resistance. Her gunners prepared their weapons with steady precision, and the familiar procedures comforted men who relied on disciplined routines under mounting tension. Japanese commanders believed darkness granted their fleet a decisive advantage, and they considered night fighting an art perfected through constant training. Kirishima's searchlights remained dark initially, yet crews stood ready because Japanese doctrine demanded sudden illumination before unleashing devastating broadsides. Lookouts scanned the black horizon relentlessly, and their keen eyes represented Japan's continued preference for human perception over untested electronic machines. The battlecruiser's engines rumbled confidently beneath armored decks, and engineers maintained flawless coordination to ensure Kirishima responded instantly to every tactical order. Her officers trusted traditional tactics deeply, and they believed speed and aggression allowed Japanese ships to outmaneuver heavier American battleships consistently. Kirishima's bridge carried an atmosphere of practiced calmness, yet officers sensed something unusual in the oppressive silence masking potential dangers. Reports from destroyer screens arrived intermittently, and each update suggested an American presence hiding somewhere beyond visible limits. Japanese doctrine emphasized rapid engagement once targets appeared, and Kirishima's crew prepared mentally for violent exchanges expected to begin without extended warning. Gunners rehearsed firing solutions verbally, and their calculations depended entirely on visual spotting that required bright searchlights piercing the heavy darkness. Kirishima's commanders remained unaware of an unprecedented threat, and they assumed American ships lacked night fighting capability equal to imperial standards. Her crews maintained strict readiness while advancing steadily, and they relied on years of experience rather than unfamiliar technologies still viewed with suspicion. The battlecruiser pushed through Iron Batom Sound with confidence, and her officers believed their formation could overwhelm any American attempt to challenge them. Her hull sliced through turbulent water rhythmically, and the comforting motion concealed vulnerabilities that would soon be exposed brutally by Washington's radar dominance. Lookouts continued scanning desperately as shadows deepened, yet no one realized distant pulses from an unseen opponent tracked Kirishima perfectly. Aggressive heritage encouraged boldness tonight, and every sailor expected another clash proving Japan's superiority in close-range naval combat. Kirishima advanced unaware that her proud history faced a radically different opponent, and she carried traditions unable to counter invisible detection shaping the battlefield. As she closed the distance toward American forces unknowingly, Kirishima sailed into a confrontation demonstrating that experience alone could not defeat technological evolution, redefining modern warfare forever. Washington's radar pulsed methodically through the darkness, and its invisible beams carved pathways no human lookout could ever equal. Operators monitored returning echoes carefully, and their practiced coordination transformed abstract signals into precise bearings, revealing Kirishima's hidden approach. The radar suite functioned flawlessly despite brutal humidity, and technicians trusted its reliability more than any distant glimmer across black water. Washington detected Kirishima long before visual confirmation, and this early contact granted Admiral Lee crucial minutes to shape an unprecedented engagement. Radar operators reported target data calmly, and their disciplined voices guided Washington's guns toward an opponent still unaware of American detection. Each sweeping rotation strengthened contact clarity, and the increasing resolution painted Kirishima's position with accuracy unattainable through traditional optical methods. Washington's bridge processed unfolding information instantly, and Admiral Lee recognized their advantage depended entirely on trusting instruments rather than hesitant visual assessment. Lookouts remained vigilant despite obsolete dependence, yet none could penetrate darkness masking Kirishima's silhouette from even the sharpest trained eyes. American sailors understood radar redefined perception, and their confidence grew steadily as distant echoes transformed into reliable predictions guiding every tactical calculation. Washington's plotting teams mapped enemy movement continuously, and their synchronized updates created a shared awareness impossible for visually dependent Japanese formations. The crew felt unprecedented calmness under pressure, because radar granted certainty usually absent during chaotic night battles shaped by guesswork, where Japanese doctrine prized aggressive illumination. Washington relied on invisible pulses carrying information that determined victory before shells were fired. The advantage emerged starkly as distance closed, and Washington maneuvered confidently knowing Kirishima remained blind to the approaching threat. Radar's silent tracking erased traditional uncertainties, and this capability overturned decades of naval assumptions centered on human observation during darkness. Every update sharpened firing readiness gradually, and gunnery crews aligned solutions trusting instruments to guide devastating salvos at unseen adversaries. Tactical picture grew increasingly precise with each cycle, and Washington approached engagement range, holding unmatched situational control across dark water. Although lookouts strained desperately against darkness, radar rendered their efforts obsolete by providing continuous contact, independent of visibility. The disparity defined the coming exchange brutally, because Washington possessed detection superiority while Kirishima advanced unaware she was already targeted. Admiral Lee recognized this advantage instantly, and he prepared Washington's gunners to unleash overwhelming fire the moment. Calculations confirmed lethal proximity. Radar continued painting Kirishima's course flawlessly, and the accuracy granted Washington dominance that ensured Japanese tactics no longer dictated nocturnal battle conditions. With each passing second, Washington tightened her approach, and the invisible advantage widened until Kirishima entered a trap crafted by electromagnetic mastery. In that critical moment, technology overshadowed tradition completely, and Washington prepared devastation unseen by sailors relying solely on vulnerable eyesight. Washington's guns roared across the darkness instantly, and their devastating opening salvo crossed iron baton sound with precision unmatched in previous naval engagements. The main battery fired with perfect synchronization, and each turret delivered shells guided by radar calculations that guaranteed unparalleled accuracy under chaotic conditions. Kirishima endured the first hit violently, and the explosion ripped through her superstructure while stunning crews struggled to understand the unseen. Attacker. Washington maintained relentless firing rhythm steadily, and operators corrected minor deviations swiftly to ensure every subsequent salvo tracked Kirishima's increasingly erratic path. The second hit smashed into Kirishima's forward areas brutally, and the shock disabled critical communication lines that previously coordinated her complex battle responses. Another salvo landed with punishing force quickly, and the shells ignited compartments already weakened by earlier impacts that shattered crew confidence rapidly. Washington's gunners continued firing without hesitation, and their disciplined concentration harnessed radar superiority to overwhelm a ship still relying on human perception. The fourth hit tore through Kirishima's engineering spaces violently, and the ensuing fires compromised vital machinery powering her gradual turn toward attempted withdrawal. Kirishima's crew fought flooding desperately, yet worsening structural damage forced frantic decisions that reflected diminishing hopes of restoring effective combat capability. A devastating impact crippled steering mechanisms abruptly, and Kirishima began drifting uncontrollably while Washington closed the distance confidently with radar maintaining flawless tracking. Another shell penetrated deeper into her hull forcefully, and this explosion destabilized ammunition stores that crews attempted to cool despite overpowering flames. Washington unleashed further salvos as minutes passed, and each calculated hit widened devastation until Kirishima's silhouette flickered through smoke illuminated by burning debris. The seventh hit erupted with catastrophic intensity, and the fireball consumed multiple gun positions whose operators could no longer sustain organized resistance. Washington's pace never faltered during this sequence, and Admiral Lee trusted radar completely while directing salvos that disintegrated remaining Japanese cohesion. Kirishima suffered another direct strike near rear sections, and the blast ruptured crucial bulkheads needed to prevent unstoppable flooding across interconnected compartments. As additional shells struck with ruthless precision, Kirishima's listing increased steadily while firefighting teams realized containment efforts had become practically impossible. Washington continued harnessing technological superiority confidently, and each impact emphasized how radar transformed gunnery from uncertain estimation into mechanical certainty shaping battle outcomes. The ninth hit sealed Kirishima's fate permanently, and the explosion extinguished any realistic possibility of survival as damage accumulated uncontrollably. Within 7 devastating minutes, Washington established complete dominance, and Kirishima succumbed to unparalleled firepower unleashed by a battleship operating beyond traditional limitations. As the Japanese crew abandoned their crippled vessel helplessly, Washington's mastery of radar-directed firepower demonstrated decisively that the era of optical combat had ended. Admiral Willis Lee guided Washington through darkness calmly, and his decisions reflected deep understanding of radar capabilities that allowed unprecedented maneuvering against unseen threats. He maintained strict control over Washington's speed adjustments, and each ordered change positioned the battleship advantageously while denying Japanese gunners predictable firing angles. Lee relied entirely on radar data throughout the engagement, and this trust allowed him to shape movements independent of visual limitations affecting enemy forces. He steered Washington along a path minimizing exposure consistently, and this deliberate course prevented Kirishima from acquiring accurate bearings essential for effective counterfire. Every adjustment to Washington's heading carried purpose, and Lee calculated angles that maximized broadside opportunities, while reducing risks from unexpected enemy torpedoes. Radar teams updated situational awareness continuously, and their efficient communication enabled Lee to anticipate Japanese movements before Kirishima's lookouts identified Washington's precise location. Lee kept Washington outside Japanese optical range intentionally, and this distance forced enemy gunners to rely on unreliable guesses shaped by chaotic darkness. The ship's maneuvering pattern remained deceptively fluid, and each subtle shift protected vulnerable sections while enhancing firing control during Washington's relentless bombardment. Crew members recognized Lee's mastery immediately, and their confidence strengthened as Washington evaded incoming threats despite operating within a contested nocturnal battlefield. The admiral understood Japanese doctrine thoroughly, and he used that knowledge to counter tactics dependent on illumination and coordinated destroyer screening. Lee ensured Washington avoided fixed trajectories carefully, and his strategy denied enemy weapons predictable vectors that normally supported effective night engagements. Every radar echo contributed to Lee's decisions confidently, and he maneuvered Washington with precision, demonstrating how electronic awareness eclipsed traditional observation methods. As the battle intensified, Washington remained untouched, and this exceptional outcome resulted directly from Lee's foresight. During each calculated positional adjustment, he maintained calmness under pressure consistently, and his measured leadership allowed the crew to operate without hesitation despite heavy fighting nearby. Washington's hull carved through dark water silently, and Lee ensured her movements exploited advantages unseen by opponents relying purely on human sight. The battleship never drifted into converging fire zones, and this controlled navigation prevented Kirishima's gunners from gaining any fleeting opportunity to target accurately. Lee used Washington's turning radius expertly, and each maneuver emphasized his ability to blend speed, stealth, and overwhelming firepower seamlessly. His actions protected not only Washington, but also South Dakota indirectly, and his judgment compensated for errors that might have endangered the task force. The admiral balanced aggression with caution skillfully, and this equilibrium ensured Washington dominated offensively without presenting vulnerabilities typically exploited during night combat. By the time Kirishima collapsed under sustained firepower, Lee's flawless maneuvering demonstrated how strategic precision ensured victory, without Washington suffering even a single hit. For decades, the Japanese Navy dominated night fighting effortlessly, and their sailors trusted aggressive doctrine shaped by training that emphasized eyesight, intuition, and coordinated illumination. They believed darkness shielded their formations naturally, and this confidence allowed destroyer flotillas and cruisers to strike enemies before detection became possible. Imperial commanders considered night engagements sacred traditions, and their reliance on searchlights and human lookouts defined every tactical decision made under moonless skies. However, radar's emergence overturned these long-held advantages abruptly, and Japanese crews failed to recognize early signals that their superiority was collapsing. American ships detected opponents before any visual contact, and this transformation removed the element of surprise that Japan previously exploited with deadly reliability. When Washington illuminated targets using invisible pulses alone, Japanese forces realized too late that traditional methods offered no defense against electronic awareness. Lookouts strained desperately through darkness as always, yet their efforts remained pointless because radar revealed positions without requiring the faintest silhouette. American plotting teams generated continuous enemy movement predictions, and these calculations erased uncertainty that typically favored Japanese units during chaotic night encounters. The psychological effect proved devastating for Japanese sailors. because their trusted doctrines collapsed instantly when ambush positions failed without apparent explanation. Radar-guided salvos struck with precision impossible through optical means, and each impact confirmed that darkness now served American gunners rather than Japanese tacticians. Kirishima's inability to locate Washington reflected broader systemic flaws, and Japanese commanders realized their ships fought blind while Americans fought informed. Every radar sweep widened the technological gap further, and Japanese formations gradually lost willingness to approach night battles once considered their strongest domain. Veteran officers recognized the shift with dread, and many understood electronic detection neutralized decades of training focused exclusively on visual combat skill. American forces moved confidently across dark water thereafter, and their growing mastery ensured Japanese units could no longer rely on surprise or speed. The collapse of night superiority echoed across later campaigns, and repeated defeats demonstrated that innovation outweighed experience when technology reshaped naval warfare. Radar made Japanese pre-battle assumptions obsolete immediately, and this sudden obsolescence left commanders without fallback strategies when illumination timing lost effectiveness. Each engagement reinforced the disparity relentlessly, and Japanese morale deteriorated as crews realized night operations no longer guaranteed tactical dominance. American battleships executed maneuvers impossible under visual reliance, and radar coordination enabled positioning advantages that Japanese officers could neither anticipate nor counter effectively. Darkness ceased being an ally for Imperial forces entirely, and the night that once empowered their operations now exposed every hidden vulnerability. By the time Washington shattered Kirishima with unseen precision, Japan's night supremacy lay broken permanently as radar transformed darkness into America's decisive battlefield advantage. Iron Batom Sound became hallowed ground that night, and the duel between Washington and Kirishima would forever redefine naval strategy across the Pacific. Admiral Willis Lee commanded with unparalleled precision, and his decisions highlighted how a single skilled officer could leverage technology to dominate entire engagements. Washington's radar-directed fire obliterated Kirishima in minutes, and this outcome demonstrated the growing importance of electronic detection over traditional night combat methods consistently. Japanese naval officers witnessed failure firsthand, and their perception of darkness as a tactical advantage evaporated completely under the relentless power of American innovation. The duel revealed that concentrated firepower combined with real-time information dramatically outweighed numerical parity when one side mastered situational awareness accurately. American sailors recognized their place in history, and they understood that effective coordination between technology and human skill could produce outcomes once considered impossible. Washington's victory validated investment in radar technology, and the engagement reshaped training programs emphasizing detection systems over reliance on visual spotting alone immediately. This single confrontation forced the Imperial Navy to reconsider doctrine, and analysts concluded that night surface engagements required adaptation to overcome electronic observation continuously. Tactical manuals were revised after the battle, and strategic planners realized that pre-war assumptions about stealth and surprise no longer guaranteed operational success reliably. The duel demonstrated psychological impact decisively, and surviving Japanese crews hesitated in subsequent encounters, fearing unseen threats rather than relying on established training confidently. Washington's triumph reinforced American industrial and technological supremacy, and it illustrated how innovation could convert marginal advantages into decisive battlefield dominance instantly. Radar operators, gunners, and bridge officers combined their expertise seamlessly, and the engagement became a textbook example of integrated systems achieving overwhelming precision under combat conditions. The loss of Kirishima symbolized the decline of pre-war night tactics, and it forced both sides to appreciate that future naval conflicts depended increasingly on electronics. American commanders used lessons learned to enhance future operations, and the duel influenced engagement planning for months across Solomon Islands campaigns immediately thereafter. Iron Batom Sound itself transformed symbolically, and its waters became a proving ground for demonstrating how modern technology could tilt the balance of power decisively. The psychological effects extended beyond the immediate battle, and Imperial officers feared similar radar-directed attacks against other heavy units, altering deployment strategies significantly. Washington's achievement inspired confidence throughout the Pacific Fleet, and sailors realized that mastery of detection, positioning, and firepower could overcome even the most experienced opponents reliably. Every report and mission log from the engagement reinforced doctrinal change, and analysts codified techniques that would inform decades of future naval warfare internationally. By the end of the confrontation, Iron Bottom Sound represented more than battlefield terrain, and it embodied the transition from traditional seamanship to technology-driven naval dominance permanently. Duel illustrated that decisive leadership combined with emerging electronic warfare would define victories, and future naval planners treated this battle as a turning point indefinitely. Washington emerged from Iron Bottom Sound triumphant, and her crew understood that their victory represented more than sinking a battleship. But the dawn of electronic warfare, Admiral Willis Lee's leadership ensured precise execution, and his reliance on radar transformed tactical thinking while demonstrating technology's decisive potential in modern naval conflicts. The sinking of Kirishima marked the first time an American battleship destroyed an enemy counterpart using radar-guided fire. Exclusively during night combat. Radar became the silent giant behind victory, and its invisible pulses ensured Washington operated with awareness unmatched by any contemporary Japanese vessel. American gunners trained extensively in radar targeting, and their discipline demonstrated how human skill, combined with electronic systems, could achieve historically unprecedented accuracy reliably. Washington's triumph reshaped naval doctrine permanently, and military strategists recognized that technological mastery now dictated engagement success more than conventional strength alone. The battle influenced training across the Pacific Fleet, and officers incorporated electronic warfare lessons into every subsequent night operation to maintain tactical advantage consistently. Japan's reliance on visual spotting and moonlit advantage proved obsolete, and Imperial forces faced the harsh reality that technology could overcome experience under extreme conditions. Washington became a symbol of innovation, and her success highlighted the potential for electronic systems to dominate battles previously dictated by intuition and sight alone. Historians later emphasized the significance of the engagement, and they cited Washington as a turning point where electronic detection began reshaping surface combat doctrine permanently. The battle demonstrated that leadership, precision, and technological investment could combine to achieve decisive outcomes without risking unnecessary casualties. During high-stakes engagements, every shell fired with radar guidance emphasized how invisible systems could dictate results before opponents even recognized the threat, establishing a new standard for naval operations. The psychological impact extended across both fleets, and Japanese sailors approached night operations cautiously, fearing unseen adversaries guided by electronic superiority rather than human perception. Legacy inspired engineers and tacticians alike, and lessons from Iron Bottom Sound informed post-war naval planning, emphasizing integrated systems and technological innovation fully. Electronic warfare, once theoretical, became tangible during this engagement, and radar's effectiveness proved that mastery of information could outweigh brute force decisively. The ship herself symbolized American ingenuity, and her quiet lethal efficiency represented a broader evolution in naval warfare shaping strategy for decades ahead. Crew members carried pride quietly, and each understood that their actions validated investment in emerging technologies while redefining what a battleship could achieve in combat. Washington's victory influenced every future fleet exercise, and lessons learned from her radar-guided success became core principles for training officers and sailors worldwide consistently. Iron Bottom Sound witnessed not only destruction but transformation, and Washington's triumph signaled the arrival of a new era where electronic systems would dictate battlefield dominance indefinitely. The silent giant had changed history, and her legacy proved that intelligence, innovation, and leadership could triumph over tradition even in the darkest, most lethal hours of war.